My name is BenjiBrundin. I'm a published author and an adventurer from Melbourne, and I just love exploring new places and getting out into the wild. I started riding motorcycles in 2018. I'd never ridden a motorcycle before in my life, and I just got on one and I fell in love with it. Decided to do a big trip around Australia with a motorcycle strapped to the back of my camper van. And over the course of that next year, I took that motorcycle into some of the wildest parts of the country, including the Compass Points, Kakadu, and some of the wildest beaches on the continent. It's the total freedom. When you're on a motorbike and you're riding on a beach, you taste the salt air on your lips. Another person said to me, when you're driving a car, it's like you're watching a movie. When you're riding a motorbike, it's like you're in the movie. If you're riding through the forest, you feel the temperature drop in the trees. If you are in the bush, you feel the bush change around you before you see it. If there's wild animals in the area, you'll smell their hide as they run off into the bush in the dust. It's just a magic feeling. There's nothing that beats it in the world. I got back to Melbourne in December 2018 after touching the Compass Points and going into some really wild places around the country, and I just felt like I had more to give. So I planned an expedition to cross all 10 Australian deserts, solo and unsupported, on my motorbike, the same motorbike. Once that plan was hatched, I spent the next 7 months planning for that trip, rebuilding my motorbike and doing all the logistics for the trip. And I was lucky enough to get that done in August of that year and became the first person to successfully cross all 10 Australian deserts, solo and unsupported, on a motorbike. Got the Guinness World Record as well. I've always been a guy that's loved adventure, and I've always been a guy that's always wanted to challenge myself and push the boundaries of what's possible. So when I was younger, I wanted to be in the Special Forces, and every time I've had a job, I've always wanted to do the hardest job, or have the most adventurous role, or take the biggest risks. So I guess that's just part of my personality. With the deserts, I just wanted to do something that no one had ever done before and do something really special. So I felt, after everything I'd learnt on the 12 months prior to the deserts, traveling around the country, I just learnt so much about myself, about pushing the boundaries, about pushing myself further and further and further into the wild places. And I knew I just had so much more to give. So everyone thought I was a little bit crazy for planning the expedition, but they didn't know what I knew. I hadn't seen what I'd seen, or had done what I'd done, so I knew I could get the job done. Australia is the driest inhabited continent in the world, right next to Antarctica. Over 70% of the Australian continent is made up of desert region, and that region is split up into 10 defined deserts. Only 3% of the Australian population lives in those deserts, so it is literally one of the most remote, untouched wilderness areas left in the world. The desert region covers over 1.5 million square kilometres of land. There's only dirt tracks going through and only a few small Aboriginal communities throughout that area, so the isolation is complete when you're out there. There were times when I was travelling across the desert and I knew that I was probably the only person on a motorbike or a car, or anywhere for that matter, for over 1,000 square kilometres. Sometimes I'd do a radio check and just have nothing but radio silence for days. So yeah, it was a pretty crazy experience. I can remember in the Simpson Desert, which is one of the eastern deserts, sitting on top of a sand dune on sunset and just watching the sun set over an ocean of sand dunes, and just looking at that thinking, tomorrow morning I'm going to get up and I'm going to be crossing those dunes all day. And that night when I set camp on the clay pan between the dunes, I could hear dingoes howling to one another. When I was in the Gibson Desert, because there was no dunes in the Gibson Desert, it was just really rocky outcrops, so the sky was huge. It was so big you could actually see the arc of the world. Camped in a tent, so I had a very small swag. My luggage was extremely limited to what I could take, so I just had the same clothes and a jacket and a sleeping bag that I slept in every night. And yeah, on those really clear nights in all of the deserts, because the sky is so huge, you could just see stars as past the horizon. I remember when I was in the Gibson again, I came across an area it just opened up into this huge valley below me. And I sat there and I refueled my bike, and it was late in the day, so I sat there for a good hour and just dangled my feet into the void below me and just looked out over this valley, and it reminded me of the Rift Valley in Africa. And I could just see, I felt like I could see past the horizon, and I just watched the sun falling in the sky for like an hour. It was pretty amazing. So I camped not far from that spot, but the downside of that is because it was such a clear night, it was also one of the coldest nights in the desert. So in the morning I got up and I literally had to shake the frost off my jacket before I could start riding the next day. So I shivered through the night as well, but it was just absolutely breathtaking. One of the scariest moments. So I was traveling through the Great Victorian Desert. Now that is one of the central deserts, and it's also the biggest desert in Australia. I think it was on my second day going through that, I crested a sand dune and hit a tree. Now I bounced off that tree like a pinball and pulled up, and I was pretty shaken by it because it had been a close one, but my saddlebag had broken and I'd lost nearly all of my water. I had to do a quick sit rep or a situation report. I was over 500 kilometers from the closest town. I still had another 2 days of travel in front of me before I got to my next resupply point, and there were no wells or bores in that desert, and I had less than a litre of water left. That was pretty scary because I had to fix my saddlebag and go through all that, and it wasn't dire, but then I had to start bottling my urine from then on, and I started having to recycle my urine and drink it because I had so far to get to my next resupply. It was closer to go forward than it was to go backwards. And then when I thought it couldn't get any worse, a sandstorm came blowing in, and the sandstorm just was blowing me all across the tracks. So I was losing all my control, and it blew the tracks clean, which meant everything that I'd come through, my tracks were blown away. So I was all by myself out there, and if it all went bad, then no one would find me because they couldn't find my tracks. And if, let's say for example, I fell off my bike, then the storm would just blow sand over me and I'd be gone forever. That was it. There 1 minute, gone the next. So I was averaging at that stage, I was averaging about 200 kilometers a day. And because I had the fear of death thrust upon me, I rode about 350 kilometers that day to make up the 2 days I needed in front of me and to get my resupply. So that was probably one of the scariest moments. I rolled into a camp at like 8 o'clock at night. The sun was set. It was dark, and this guy, I remember I got to this, it's like the most remote roadhouse or resupply spot in Australia. It's called the Ilkirk Roadhouse. There's a caretaker there who gets flown in from Adelaide, and he does 6-week stints. Everything gets driven in and flown in by airplane. I rolled into his shop at like 8 o'clock at night on a dusty motorbike, and he just took one look at me and went, "What are you doing here? What, where have you come from?" And I was so exhausted. I said, "Mate, look, can I just roll my swag out on the deck here? I can't be bothered setting up a camp. I'm just done." And he just said, "Mate, just go sleep in the spare bed. Okay, have a shower, you'll be okay." I think people lose sight of the fact that it wasn't the desert, but before the desert, I had so many successes on that motorbike traveling around Australia. So the biggest lesson I learned was that anything's possible. If you really want to achieve something and you really have dreams that you want to turn into reality, if you set your mind to it and set some goals and have a plan, then anything is possible. Anything is possible. There's nothing to hold you back in this world but yourself. That's the biggest lesson I learned. So when I got back from my 12 months exploring around Australia, I knew I had done something special, and I wanted to share that experience with the world. So I thought, well, I'm going to write a book about it. So then when I got back to work, I started working, and funnily enough, I lost my license for speeding. So I got a job in construction, and I was able to catch a train every day. So for 3 months I was on the train at 6 a.m. I had an hour every morning and an hour every night to just pull my laptop out and write a book. And while I was planning the 10 desert expedition, I was also writing the book knowing that the 10 deserts would also complete the final chapters in that book. The book was published in March this year. We all got lockdown because of Corona, and now hopefully, fingers crossed, we're starting to get out of lockdown and Corona and we can start interacting with other people again. So during the lockdown, I've actually put a presentation together which I want to deliver to schools and workplaces about resilience and mindset and setting goals, because I think that, again, I learned so much on the back of that bike and during the expedition and setting the world record, that I just felt I had so much to share with the world about achieving goals. Because at the end of the day, I'm just a normal guy. I grew up in poverty. I had, raised by a single mother, 2 other siblings, really, really poor family. I'm a roofer. I have a small roofing business. I'm a tradesman. I work with my hands every day. I'm no one special at all. I'm not a special forces soldier. I'm not some guy. Like, I'm just a guy who gets up and wears high vis every single day, just like the rest of the population, but I've done something special. And the only reason I was able to do that is because I learned to let go of my limiting beliefs. And I want to share that message with the world. So the expedition I did in 2019 really was life-changing. It changed my life on a physical level, on a spiritual level. You just cannot describe it in words to someone, the impact it had on my life. And the scenery and the beauty of inland Australia is just breathtaking. So in 2021, I am planning a new expedition where I want to take other like-minded people with me through the deserts again. Other adventurers, people who have an adventurous mindset who want to push the boundaries of what's possible for them. So I'm putting a team together of people, together that is going to help me achieve that goal, because I can't do it by myself. So I'm going to need support staff, truck drivers. If you want to ride a motorbike, you'll be riding a motorbike. We're going to have kitchens, we're going to have medical teams coming with us on this expedition. It's going to be a huge undertaking, and it's only a very special kind of person who's going to want to do this kind of adventure. It's not a Kentucky tour, it's a proper, thought out, planned expedition. It will be hard at times. You will be sleeping in the freezing cold. Sometimes you will have to eat dehydrated meals. It won't be easy, but it will be a very special, unique thing to be a part of. And that's what I want to achieve for 2021. If you want to go out there and really push yourself and push the limits of what's possible and be part of history and be part of an incredible group of people, then you should join me. It's going to be an absolute epic adventure. And that's what life is. Life is just one big daring adventure. So get on board.